Good morning, good afternoon, Maki.
Hello, Darrell. Good morning.
How are things in the UAE?
All good, all good. How about you?
Doing fantastic.
Excellent. Are we gonna have more folks joining us? Or
Yes, yeah, let's give it a couple minutes. I know Drummond is coming in. He was up late last night. You'll see there's an issue that was bouncing around, and I guess I didn't even look at the timestamps. I know it was relatively late. Um, yeah, so 7 hours ago, so midnight time frame. Um, we had some stuff waiting in. Morning, Drum.
Yep, it was, one of those, God, well, geez, the meeting's coming up, God, post something.
Yeah, yeah, yep.
Well, I mean, forcing functions, what can you say? This is,
Yeah. Yeah, I sent you some one-on-one notes. We can talk about that, but I think the work you and Andor did on Park, I think is really helpful. Got Scott here. Um, I'll start sorry, I'll share my screen. It's really there's only two things really I think to work on. Um, just a reminder that this is for Trust RAP members. Our antitrust competition friendly policy is in place. If you are not a member, please keep yourself to observer status. You're more than welcome to be here if that's true. Small group here, just a couple quick updates on what was going on from last week. I took action items on a few fronts. Um, Visited with Scott. Scott and I had a fantastic, both Scott and Alex and I met on different meetings on Tuesday this week. Went through a couple things. Scott and I were discussing the ambiguity between trust registry ID versus ecosystem ID. Reached some good conclusions on that. Alex and I were visiting on the issue he raised of claim ID. I have a PR in place. That PR has been nuked, but we'll figure out how to get it back in. The issue, short summary of the Alex in the claim ID issue is that some ecosystems checked perhaps, I don't actually, I think this is actually a convenience versus a requirement. They require a little bit of more information to say, hey, here's the locator, which is the term we're using in the context object now, optional, to provide the ability to, in the case of checked, traverse the ledger and know what your starting point is. My comment on that with Alex was that if you're providing a trust registry protocol service endpoint, you should already know that information and be providing it. And if you need to do live traversal of a ledger, I think you have potentially a design issue, but I also see use cases where that's actually going to be necessary. Alex was content that the addition of a locator object, we can look at the PR if we get to that. I don't think we're going to. Um, that is another optional parameter in the context object. So now our context object has two optional parameters, time, which is the time at which I'm querying, and locator, but also allows you to add whatever you want to that. So Alex seemed pleased on that, but we should dive into just a reminder, the goal was to get this out, get the spec out. A couple of things to follow up on. One is, and Drummond, the procedure thing, I actually have a question for you because I put an item on the bottom. What do we do about deprecating the TRP, the V1 TRP?
that's up to us. We can,
Just send it. Do we as a task force send that? Do we send it to the working
oh,
group? Like
oh, that's a good
procedurally,
point.
literally procedurally.
Well, um, you're right. Any final decision goes to the working group. But we task forces basically take something to the point where they're ready for a working group decision. So
Right.
remind me because it's been long enough when we did uh the 1.0 or 1.x series, did we just was it what we published before, did we have a working group vote on like the public review?
I don't know. I'll have to look into
Because I
that.
I
Have
don't
to look. Take that as an action item. I don't know. I don't remember.
yeah, I mean we can go look at the status,
Yeah.
but I think we stopped at public review. We didn't
Yeah.
you know, call it a finished 1.0. So if it was in public review, there isn't really anything to deprecate other than uh I think we would want to include a like a sentence in this saying this supersedes any previous versions of specifications. Um, yeah, whatever language, but yeah, I think we just proceed now. I think you mentioned to me that there is a yeah that we want to do that because we don't want folks. Uh,
I know of at least one company who is fixated on it. So we
that's
need to clarify
interesting.
that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool. So procedurally, that's all I had for quick updates. Anybody else have any updates, action items we want to go through?
Anything different than what we have on the agenda?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
No.
Mr. Perry, Mackie,
No, I'm
Yeah, all
good.
good.
perfect. So let's get into a discussion. In our last meeting, there were three action items. One was to talk about park. Drummond and I didn't, unfortunately, really unfortunately, didn't manage to connect on that. The other two were I mentioned them already, following up on claim ID with Alex, and I followed up with Scott on trust registry ID, which the trust registry ID issue does come into play here. And Scott, I think this provides some clarity. Drummond and Drummond weighed in last night on a couple of things, and I'll summarize it as really the following. There's a couple other consequences, meaning things that need to follow, but really the meat of it. And Drummond, let me know if I'm characterizing this correctly. Welcome, William. The park model, which I have more detail on, and you've got more detail on the ticket, but really comes down to this. The changes would be that we have this term called assertion ID, which is, we keep saying it's just a string. But we're looking to break it apart into action and resource, such as action of issue, resource being Ohio driver's license, action being uh, verify,
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
resource again, Ohio driver's license or whatever. That's the change. One of the changes. The other change that I'm pushing for, and we got it, is that the trust registry ID creates nothing but confusion. Adds, I got a better document than what I'm saying. And I think that's really the meat of it. But if we want to dive into the issue itself, Drummond, do you want to cover off an intro
Sure.
to it, or did you get a chance to look at my input?
No, because I posted last night and just got
Okay.
up this morning.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Let me just go through my input then, perhaps, because you and Andor are closest to the park discussions, which I think are.
yes.
So a couple of things here. I think the action resource approach, which we'll get into what that is, I'll describe that below. The work upwards in the ticket that Andor and Drummond weighed in, I think that actually breaks a problem we've had of ambiguity, meaning assertion ID, we chose it because we didn't like authorization, and neither word fits well. I think it's a real improvement in the protocol design. Consequences, I don't think it's as important, but as a consequence, we can talk about this, but the ABNF recommendations that we have throughout the document become moot. They become confusing at
Yes.
best, dangerous, dangerous at worst. I will add the following couple statements. One is that trust registry ID to me is redundant and confusing, and I believe it should be removed from the documents, and it should not. And here's my premise on that. When I'm making an API call or speaking over DIDCOM or TSP, I am talking definitively to the trust registry. I've already identified it through a URI, through my endpoint. If it's a DIDCOM endpoint, that's a different approach, but I am literally speaking to the thing. I think part of the confusion came in when there were discussions about, well, it could be multi-tenant and trust registry may be hosting for multiple ecosystems. Granted, that's a true point. It could be, but it's not relevant in the following way. An ecosystem is not going to point to an ambiguous trust registry endpoint. They're going to point to their trust registry endpoint. It's definitively theirs. If there's a logical multi-tenant structure behind it, every multi-tenant infrastructure provides a disambiguation way. If I've logged in with the username and password, I don't know that there are other tenants. If you give me a specific endpoint that is pathed, you know, IRA trust registry, IRA cards network / trust registry or R / authorization. You've done it through the URI itself, but I can't come up with a system that needs to have more information passed in. I can't figure out where that is. But adding the trust registry ID begins to ask questions. Here's another English-wise. Here's what we ask: does entity X have authorization Y within ecosystem Z? We don't say, does ecosystem have authorization according to that trust registry? That's not how we talk about it. It's not a governance question. The trust registry is the manifestation of the governance. So this is, needs more reading. But I don't see any upside to using trust registry ID. For those who are new to the Park model, Park is a model that's being used in a thing called Cedar. I have no context on that. Drummond can provide that, but it is an elegant solution that talks about the party. Actually, I thought it was principal. Did I type this wrong?
Yeah,
I
it's
typed it wrong.
principal.
I'll make that fix. Basically the entity, which we're calling entity ID. And then it has a concept of what is the action on the type of thing. Now, I'll use specifically the type of thing because this is not a case where I'm saying, can I adjust that particular driver's license? Like it's literally our world of authorizations is, are you allowed to issue that kind of thing? Not that particular Drummond Reed's Washington State driver's license. It's no. Are you a Washington State driver's license issuer? That makes sense, Drum?
Yes.
Yep. And then the context is what is the context you're asking in? And my premise is that it is always the ecosystem. That's it. There's no other context, which I think is where the only difference, Drummond, that I think I see on the Park model that we have, which goes back to that trust registry ID comment. So the
Yes.
recommendations I've got is that the assertion ID should be decomposed into separate action and resource components. I started to look at consistency, Drummond, on is it action or action ID? And I went, ooh, bad idea. Action ID is bad idea because it goes very concrete very, very quickly. And that is not the approach I think we're looking at. Meaning, if I'm going to say issue as opposed to action ID, this is not as bad. But when I say
Yeah,
resource,
I'm fine with just action and resource.
yeah, it actually, when I did resource ID, it got really bad because it's literally Drummond's driver's license. It's the concrete single thing. But when I just say resource, cool. I think it's actually really, really big improvement. So here's what I summarize, and I'll shut up in a moment. One, that we remove the trust registry ID entirely. That includes referencing to it, diagrams, etc. We use ecosystem ID. We use action and resource as the field names. So we break it into sort of three it's 4. But the story still stands. Does entity X have authorization Y in ecosystem Z? That still works as a concept for explaining it. It's just when you look at authority, it's like, what do you mean by that? Well, it's a resource with an action. Are you allowed to issue that thing? And that the action resource, when we adopt it, we remove basically the A, B, and F. The consequences, we remove the A, B, and F concepts. I will shush up now. Drummond, you're particularly close to this. Thoughts?
Yeah, so I suggest we just break this into the Park discussion as Park is our information model, and then separately your point about do we need trust registry IDs or not. So if we can talk about the Park model first,
Yep.
I'm fully supportive as explained in my write-up above that. If you scroll up to that, Daryl, the first part just quotes the yeah, that part right there, how Cedar authorization works. And as I explained there, since I've been last at a meeting, I happened to be asked to speak at a LFDT event here in Seattle, one that Scott punted on. It was a Friday afternoon in August, so I don't blame him. But anyway, it had a talk by the the lead architect, who's Amina, was just amazing, and it was, all about. And she explained the park models you see right there, the PARC, and it was like, oh wow, it's just really cool. And of course, Cedar, if folks are not aware, is the authorization system used for Amazon that does some like multiple billions of queries a day. And so, it's just really, really deeply thought through. And so I was just, looking at it. And meanwhile, independently, because of the things he's working on, Andor was also looking at it. And when I happened to get together with Andor the following week, and we were talking about it, we are like, hey, exactly what you said, Daryl. If we take what was our assertion ID and just break it into action resource, suddenly you're right. I literally don't think we need the ABNF anymore, because it's just so clear how we would parse it. And so I just recommend exactly what you're saying, is that we just basically in the spec we can just say, hey, here's the information model, here's how we use it, here's the API calls, just it's just those three sections. And I said at the end of my post that I'm all for it. I just didn't want to try and draft it before IW, but I think it's simple enough. I'm revising that. If you're willing to work with me, Daryl, so that I can just write up something in like
Well,
in the
we have not talked about the American League Championship Series yet, so I'm not sure if I'm willing to work with you or not, but we'll see.
Well, you should be very heartened by what happened yesterday.
Yeah, after last night, yes.
I did not. Luckily, I was busy enough. I said I'm just going to watch the end of that game. But then when I watched I watched the key plays leading up to that, and I'm like, I'm not watching the end of this game. This is horrible. So anyway, we'll leave that
Yeah.
aside.
Cool.
Anyway, so seriously, I think it's not. It's a fairly simple revision. So I definitely, and you have Andor's proxy couldn't be here today, but
Yep.
both of us are fully behind it. So.
I'm going to need Andor's help on PRs.
Oh yeah, I think
Yeah.
he should be able to help on that. He just
Yep.
had a conflict for this
Yep.
meeting today.
Cool. So folks, so really there are two I would say major thrusts to the major issues. One is the shift to adopting the park model, which is basically cleaning up assertion to be about action and resource. Does anybody have any concerns on that? Anyone want to discuss further? We're going to obviously document things and propose changes that we get to review ahead of time. But anyone want to discuss right now?
Yeah,
Cool.
any objections? I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, Daryl, actually, in terms of before we get to the other issue, that it's simple and clear enough, and of course we could take advantage of the fact that it's park models already well documented elsewhere.
We
That
can point to it.
Yeah, we
Right.
can point to it. So therefore it makes it even simpler
Yep.
for us. So if I and I think, and Andor, I actually asked him this last night when I was
Yeah.
talking to him. If we can draft something today, let's say, Google Doc, that the three of us at the minimum can look at and go, okay, yeah, that's the replacement text. Then it's a matter of turning it into a PR, and we should be able to have something. And I know you asked, and I think it would be great to have our revised version ready to, discuss at IW, because we have at least one
Yeah.
park expert in Phil Windley that would be there and is agreed to join us and make sure everything lines up.
Yeah. Cool. So I would say that it says that we've covered off. We obviously have to get into the details, do the work, but I think we've covered off any quote contention on the use of the action resource to replace assertion concept.
Right.
So I'm going to go back
good.
up to this diagram here, because this
Yes,
comes into
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah. So my premise on this is as follows. The fact that they're an ecosystem ID is the overall identifier for the ecosystem, which is how we speak about everything. It has obviously an ecosystem governing authority. The ecosystem governing authority operates or controls at least a trust registry. that has an identifier of some kind. When I go to connect to that trust registry, I am definitively connected to that trust registry. So adding an ID into our queries is I don't know what we get from it, other than I think the conversation we had months back about it may be multi-tenant and so yes, it may be, but that's not relevant. It's not germane. It's if it is multi-tenant and I can't figure out which tenant I'm talking to, I've got a serious problem on an infrastructure level. Drummond?
Okay, so I understand what you're saying, but you're leaving out the case. You know, now if you switch to show the spec and the other diagram, I'll be happy to speak to
The
why we
stack
have
and
it.
other diagram?
Yeah,
Which one?
go to the spec.
Oh, spec. Sorry, I heard stack.
Sorry, yeah. If you can just open that in another tab. We show in section 4 two diagrams.
Yep.
You chose the first one, which is the simple
Yep.
case. The other one, I don't know whether the term multi-tenant actually represents what figure 3 represents, because the whole idea was the ability of a trust registry operator to give a DID to represent the trust registry, because they, you know, again, no one has to know it's multi-tenant, but if the trust registry operator operates the trust registry and controls what is the endpoint in
Mm-hmm.
a DID document, then the ecosystems using that don't point to a specific URL. They point to, they say, we use this trust registry with this DID. And that's the case we were trying to cover with trust registry ID.
So, yeah. So when you do that, you're telling me on an ecosystem basis, let me see if I follow this. In my governance framework or something that comes with the governance framework, I'm telling you, here's the trust registry endpoint I want you to use.
Here's the trust registry DID.
Right.
Not
Trust
the
registry
endpoint,
did.
the DID.
Yep.
Yeah.
Here's the trust registry did.
Yes.
Which I'm going to, in the world of either didcom, I'm going to go connect to that did, right? Bang, do the
Yes.
TRQP query across didcom or
Yes.
TSP, right? So I've
Yes.
connected to that thing identified by the did. In the HTTPS world, I'm going to go hit the did doc, get the TRQP endpoint, and hit that thing.
Yes.
So I'm literally hardwired. My premise is this, Drum, and I'm hardwired to be talking to the trust registry. As metadata, I get it. I get the trust registry ID being needed as metadata. And that's actually, if you look at the IRA profile, we do that.
Yes.
My premise is this. The blue side of this is an operational detail that should be opaque and always opaque to the consumer that cares about an ecosystem. Meaning, you've told me in your ecosystem governance framework, this is the DID that identifies my trust registry. I could even give you secondary DIDs. I could say, here are some secondaries. Here's my primary. Here's my secondaries.
Yep.
And you're going to literally connect across that wire to that endpoint, at which point you never need to know that DID again. Meaning, it is already in the context of the trust registry DID.
Yep. I totally understand what you're saying, but the case, the use cases that we were trying, that this second diagram, you know, and we would update it to the park model. We
Yep.
were, again, if you recall, Andor and I were talking about this,
Yep.
where if you wanted so you're saying the querying party would have to go to a governance framework or somehow discover, okay, this ecosystem uses this trust registry did, and therefore now I'm going to go resolve that, and I know I'm in the right place. What we were saying was, if you were talking to a trust registry and you, for instance, wanted to know what ecosystems you're authoritative
Yep.
for, you could get the statements out of that trust
Right.
registry. You can
Okay.
literally get the statements out of the registry. So
Okay.
that's why, yeah, that's
So I
why.
think, okay, now I understand the genesis of the because I couldn't understand the multi-tenant reasoning. Like, I'm like, it makes, here's my premise. I'm still 100% right now, 99.9% on ecosystem ID because of the following reasoning. When I'm talking to a trust registry and querying it to get an answer on authorization or recognition, we already have that handled. Everything else is Turkle or something else right now. I think this didn't fall into the Turkle side. Or in the case of profiles, which we do reference profiles not deeply enough here in the spec, I can certainly see the value of that. And if I look at the IRA profile of the trustworthy query profile, the trustworthy query protocol, I'm going to pull up a slide here if you folks don't, an image at least, because I'm going
Sure.
to, this is actually, I use this same image in, with both Scott and Alex.
Alex.
Uh, okay,
Right now, we're still seeing your
yeah,
browser.
I'm just getting to the slide. I need to change browsers because it's a different context. Stop. With this, oh, sorry. Jump in Windows. I have way too many windows. Share. This is really helpful because I think this is so. I'll
Yeah,
grab a
now we're seeing the
screenshot.
slide.
You're seeing this now?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to grab a screenshot of this. Bear with me. I'm going to drop it into the other window, which is a totally different Chrome browser.
Okay.
So I've just dropped that image in. So here's the general idea. And this gets into exploring what goes beyond and what happens above or around the trustworthy query protocol, which is focused on authorization and recognition. Simple as that. Do you recognize this other trust registry? And I want to do an authorization check. We're looking, we've talked about this before. The old version of the protocol had many of these concepts: metadata, lookups, entities, and ecosystems. Metadata and lookups were more about tell me about your trust registry in a concrete way. Each entities and ecosystems began to become a browsing and querying, to your point, Drummond. This entity, hey, what other trust registries are you part of? What DID methods do you support? That kind of thing. You get very particular on an entity as well as on a recognition basis. Hey, what other ecosystems are you recognizing? Hey, that's interesting. I'm going to go talk to them. But it's a traversal and discovery piece, not a query piece. This is where we moved everything into Turkle. To get more concrete on it, if I look, for example, the ones we're actually working on right now at IRA, I know I'm going to have a metadata object, don't know what it's going to be. That's fine, because in an IRA basis, we can be informal about that, churn through it. And if you notice the flow here, the goal that IRA has is to churn through this stuff quickly, find out what's working, what is it we need, make sure we've decomposed it properly, and then inform and propose changes later for the TRQP that go beyond or refine authorization and recognition. So we know we know we're going to have, hey, give me a list of the authorizations. Now this is going to change Drummond, actions, resources, right?
Right.
Assurance levels, that's a critical one for IRA. What DID methods do you support? We may end up learning we need more lookups and entities. That kind of information, Drummond, leads to, I'm going to jump back to my other screen. Share. Here we go. The goal you mentioned is that I'm talking to a trust registry. Tell me more. That's it's to me that's it's a Turkle, or in the case of the IRA profile, it's an IRA profile problem. It's not a TRQP query problem. We don't have an entity browser. We don't have other things, and I think we can accomplish that. Because here's the question I would have, and this is something Scott and I talked about on Tuesday. How did I stumble across your trust registry and started asking questions like this? Just how did I find you? Where did I get the information to say, hey, I need to connect to C2PA? I didn't just find the thing. I got the did somewhere. And I
Okay.
started by saying, oh, I want to connect to C2PA, or I want to connect to the checked AI agent management system. I had to get the did somewhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's take a practical example of if we're saying, hey, you want to have be able to have a trust registry be identified by a did. So the
Yep.
ecosystem, if the ecosystem, you know, ecosystem ID was a did, it would be
Yep.
easy for it to, you know, have in that did document, as you
Yep.
know, so it's machine readable, say,
Yep.
our trust registry is this did. So then you would just
Yep.
get the service endpoint
Right.
from that did. Now,
Bingo.
but the reason we ended up with this conceptual separation was we didn't want to tie the model to DITs alone. We wanted to say,
Yep.
oh, it's more general than that.
Which is
So
why we say ecosystem ID.
yes, and we say trust registry ID.
Well, yeah, but
Um,
we're generically using ID as a URI, right?
yes,
But those are
yes,
just those are identifiers.
right. So I guess it comes down to this in my mind. Do we want to have a formal way for our model, you know, the park model and a trust, you know, and the TRQP protocol to be able to answer questions about trust registry authorization? The protocol itself, right? Can you ask
What
a,
like okay, so let me jump. Sorry. I
yep,
dumped the I will lose that diagram, it's fine. I dumped that picture in here.
okay,
So to me, I know I need this. Like I know in order to do integration work, I need exactly what you just said. Hey, what
okay,
authorizations do you have? What other registries are you in? I really do want to know that.
right,
What we concluded with Turkle was we could never come up with a data structure that would let us do that traversal and discovery stuff. So we focused on the query being only about authorization and recognition. You're going to need that. And we talked about being implementation guidance. Ira's being very concrete. There's going to be a Swagger API that does exactly this. But we're not ready to standardize that part in the spec. Similar, let me throw an analogy at you. I have an IP address. I want to know what is its domain name? Not, I have a domain name, I want to know the IP address. Literally the inverse.
right,
There are
reverse,
tools that do that,
yep,
that do the reverse DNS lookups, but they're not
right,
part of TCP/IP.
yeah, you know, if you're saying you don't want to enable the protocol to be used to for ecosystem authorities to make authority statements about trust registries, or trust registries to make authority statements about being authorized by an ecosystem. It just comes down to, do you want, you know, in the park model, do we want to consider trust registries to be one of the resources? That's all it comes down to. Now, actually,
Which the model supports.
well, actually, I'm realizing that,
Because here's what the park model doesn't ever do. It doesn't tell you who you're talking to. It tells you how you're talking. That's what
yeah,
TRQP is about,
exactly.
right?
Well, and in my write-up, that's why I basically said, okay, you know, the majority of the time, you know, that I'd say we'd all agree that the main thing you want to know is what is an ecosystem authorizing, right? And so therefore the context is the ecosystem ID, right? In
I
the
would
park.
also ask this, if I ask a trust registry endpoint, not a trust registry ID, a trust endpoint, are
Right.
you authorized to do that thing? It's going to lie to me if it wants to,
Well, which is
right?
ironic. Now you're making the case, can you find an authorization statement in that trust registry, you know, that, and you'd want to know, okay, for instance, is that who else recognizes that trust registry
Right.
as being authorized for that ecosystem, right?
Which
And that's,
which is that's the DNS reverse lookup approach analogy.
so if it boils down to this, you're saying in 2.0 you don't think, quote, reverse lookup I'm not sure in my mind it's directly comparable, but I do get the analogy. And if you're saying, oh, we want to simplify it by just not including that capability, I don't think I have any major objection.
But you could also, and again, I really like the action resource thing because it
Yes,
clarifies so much. And I
it
understand
does.
why you guys leaned in on it. We could say, here's a recommendation for use of the TRQP that says by the way, if you want to find out, you know, here's the action resource thing to ask or something that says, is this one authorized? But if you're looking to traverse and learn more, that's where we stopped and moved that all into Turkle and outside of the search and discovery is outside of the protocol.
Yeah, again, I wasn't necessarily saying it's the key thing we were looking for in that second diagram, figure 3 in the spec was authorization of the trust registry by the ecosystem governing authority
Yeah.
when you had this situation.
Yeah. So yeah.
I do agree that we, under the park model, and just revisiting this, we could simplify this quite a bit. And potentially, what you're convincing me is I'm not even sure we need a separate diagram for this, because under the park model, and it's yet another reason why I like it, the trust registry is a resource. It's just a resource.
Yeah.
So we don't necessarily have to even bring this up. All we could just use examples of, hey, if you want to, if the trust registry is identified as a resource, then you can have statements about it, and we can
Yeah.
provide some examples, and we don't
Yeah.
actually need the complexity of the second diagram.
Which also agreed on that. I would throw the one thing that if I want to pretend to be you, I'm going to lie to you.
Um,
Meaning, when you ask me, are you authorized by your ecosystem to do this? I'm going, yeah, totally, man. Totally.
well, yeah, but even in that situation, we had assumed behind this diagram, you got to get a statement signed by somebody.
Exactly. So now you go back to the ecosystem ID. Now, specifically in the IRA realm, the ecosystem did. So
Right.
the ecosystem ID is a did. I get the did doc and I get two things back. It says, here's my authorized trust registry and here's my governance framework. You've now separated the concerns, right? I can try to lie, but so you're going to check me up on the ecosystem ID. I'm stuck. I can't fake that.
Right.
Yeah. So am I correct, Drummond, that you're okay with removal of trust registry ID, and that actually simplifies this diagram a bunch?
Well, yes, because I think so, because I think what we can say in the spec is that the trust registry is a resource. So if you want to have statements about the resource, then and we can say you can, the trust registry does not have to be identified by DID. If it's just a URL, then you're starting with whatever authority you find out from the ecosystem ID. But trust registry can also be a DID, in which case the statement you get the resource is identified with the DID, and you'll discover the endpoint by resolving that DID.
Let me give a better example. One of the difficulties we've had, and this came up in Scott's discussion, there is a need to have secondary scaling trust registries. If I'm
Sure.
talking to a primary trust registry, one of the authorizations I may want to check is that secondary entity authorized to be, acting like you?
Exactly.
Yeah. Mackie.
Yeah, I think when you say, ecosystem, it's quite vague, I would say, in terms of, emphasizing on accountability. So I think maybe it's better to say authority ID. I think it links well with the ecosystem governing authority. So saying instead of ecosystem ID, authority ID, because here you would have more accountability, I think, as opposed to making it, very vague as ecosystem.
In other words, if we only use one term, it's funny because as I was looking over and writing this stuff up last night, I was I was thinking the same thing as Maki just said. It's a more general term. In other words, we use the term ecosystem, in trust over IP terminology, but I mean, well, Scott's already left. We adopted that term authority ID, and I agree we don't, because we wanted to basically abstract what but to be consistent with the idea that what you were trust registry was getting authority statements. And we said, okay, well, authority statements are made by an authority, so let's just call it. If we're going to remove the two and just have one, I would agree with Maki. Authority ID is more general, and then yeah. How do you feel about that, Daryl?
I need to digest. It's certainly the trust registry idea I have a fundamental problem with, as you can probably sense. I don't have the
Yeah,
problem here's the problem I have is this. Yes, I know, I agree that authority is the more correct statement when you get down to the correctness and definition, and that trust over IP tends to use the term ecosystem. And that's the context of which we're talking about implementations. I mean, it's the term we use at IRA. And we can create implementation guidance. This is, by the way, for authority ID, use ecosystem ID. It creates it's a level of removal and ambiguity that I find very abstract. I can fix it by using the IRA protocol and masking over it, but then I'm not really using the protocol natively. Need to digest how well, because I'll tell you this, authority ID has confused the living hell out of implementation people lately. It is really hard to tell the story of what are you talking about? What's the authority ID? See, well, why don't you just say ecosystem? Like it's literally that's the question people are asking.
right. And I do understand, but let me just make the point. That is also a result of, like, this diagram,
Yep.
the thing one we're looking at right now. Whereas if we document the park model, and we just say, okay, look, you need to know the context, and in a decentralized system, you have to know what the authority is. And we do always. That the problem is, and this is now a purely semantic thing. I'm wearing my concepts and terminology group hat, and Carly could weigh in as a fresh face on that. In that term ecosystem governing authority, we tend to just say, oh yeah, it's your ecosystem. But I know from discussing it, as well as with a lot of places, ecosystem is not that widely used of a term. Authority, of course, is understood everywhere, right? They're certificate authorities, right? So I'm just
Mhm.
saying that I think it's an easier thing if we just talk about, in the park model, the context. You have to know the authority, and if it's an ecosystem governing authority, then you already know. We can just say, anytime you see ecosystem, that's the authority. Anyway, I'll stop there. Carly is.
I just have one quick question. On this model, do you then only have one trust registry possible?
No, I don't think so. What would I see your point?
There is one primary for an ecosystem, but you can have
Yeah, but I mean, like,
it could be in many trust registries.
yeah, because I might, like I put in the chat there, before I can do serious shit, I might have to appear in multiple trust registries as a multi-factor authentication.
Right, but you might be there for multiple reasons. But you need to, like, if you take the DNS analogy, IRA, we're using hover. That's our oh God, I'll get the term wrong. But what ends up happening is it ends up propagating through the network. But if I want to get the definitive answer at any point in time, I have to go directly to where that DNS entry is homed. It's
But
primary,
yeah, okay. I just
right?
can see that that you would have I that you could have trust registries, your governance organization could be so large that you would have different owners who are taking authority of different data points
Mhm.
in a trust registry. So
Yep.
you would have HR doing one part, but then you might have a completely different part, which is
Yep.
saying how much authority do you have about, this
Yep.
person knows these kinds of answers, but not these kinds of
Right.
answers.
And that's where you end up with the two types of implementers, where we have the trust require protocol producer, meaning they're the ones who are giving the answers.
Yeah.
They know the intricacies of their own organization. Does HR do this? Is that the legal department? Is that this, whatever? Is that
Yeah.
over here in a different country?
Yeah.
To the outside world, they don't care. They don't want to know,
Yeah.
right? They just want the answer.
Yeah, but I might be like your ecosystem, perhaps I need to be an accredited engineer. So you
Yeah.
need to both get from inside the ecosystem, I can act as an engineer in your ecosystem, and externally from another external trust
Yep.
registry that I'm
Yep.
an accredited engineer who can legally act.
Yeah. So Scott and I talked about the fact that they actually have kind of three databases in C2PA. I was just looking to see where I have I don't know what I've done with my screens here. Where they actually had multiple, there's a difference between, and this is part of the implementation guidance we're building for our members at IRA, is you have multiple systems of record that come up with different answers.
Yeah.
And if you give me an HR question, if I'm a large
Yeah.
multinational, I'm
Yeah.
going to multiple countries, and each
Yeah.
country may have its own systems, but at the end of the day, you should be able to answer, are you an employee or not? Right? So internal, and this is also why I'm concerned about having the blue diagram. There's such a mess of stuff inside any organization. It could be very simple.
Yeah.
When it's a mess, this trivializes and makes it, it's none of our business. Can you answer the question? You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
is Daryl a professional engineer in Ontario? Which I am no longer. I retired that because I moved and wasn't doing anything with it. But you
Yeah.
could get an answer. And the fact that they had many different systems behind it, not my problem.
Okay.
And that's also, Carly, where we get into the confusion of, quote, trust registry versus
Yeah.
system of record or registration system, whatever. Sorry, Drummond, I just noticed your hands up, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Thank you.
I was going to clarify one thing in answering Carly's question. You stressed the option that behind the trustworthy query endpoint, if there are multiple systems of record, then it's up to that authority to figure out how they route and come up with the answer internally. So there's option one is you figure that out internally. You just do your delegation and figure out how to route a query depending on what it is. The other one is you just actually have nested ecosystems or nested
Yeah,
authorities, and then it works like DNS. You literally are
yeah,
delegating down the chain, and then
totally.
each one has its own PRQP
Yeah,
endpoint, and that's how you do it. Both work, right? It's just how you want to do it.
yeah. And that's a decision, and that's one of these we've learned. Hard, hard learning at IRA as we use this term ecosystem to say things like the healthcare ecosystem. And it's really comprised of healthcare, probably thousands, tens of thousands of little tiny ecosystems that are each individually authoritative, right? Like every university, Guelph is going to operate differently than Waterloo, right?
Yep, yep,
Now they may have
exactly.
the same software.
Right, and it really is up to the authority how it wants to divide it up. It can do it internally and just have one TRQP endpoint that
Yep.
can answer everything, or it can. And I'm getting more comfortable that we don't have to. If a trust registry is another resource, and under the park model, then it becomes much clearer how you would put in statements about that
Yep.
kind of resource authorization. Yeah, I do. It actually helps me understand. Yes, we can simplify it down to just talking about
Yep.
authorities under the park model, and we can simplify. We would redo these diagrams because we
Yeah.
don't need that.
The diagrams
Yeah.
simplify, which is the key. The last, sorry, Carly, your hands up.
Oh, yeah, just real quick that the model at the University of Guelph, I actually don't have an undergraduate degree from the University of Guelph. I
Right.
have a degree from the College of Biological Sciences, which is the entity that can grant degrees within the University of Guelph. So
Right.
that splitting of
And I'm
things.
sure your university registrar is jockeying at times to take that on for that college, right?
Yes.
But
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
protocol doesn't want to do politics. So
Yeah,
yeah,
but higher level degrees, I believe, are from the university.
yeah.
So
I'm
there's
sure I'm
yeah.
sure there's some faculty that says nuh-uh.
Yeah.
Right? But that's
Yeah.
the outside world. The outside world cares, but not that much. They just want to know the answer, right? Yeah. Um, just a couple quick questions. If we stick with authority ID, here's a question broadly for the group. I'm certainly willing to do this work. Bluntly, we cannot keep circling and circling and circling and not pushing out a spec. Do we believe just gut right now? We actually don't have enough that if we make these moves that we can actually make progress and get this published at some point in time soon. The TRQP, meaning we work to put the action resource to replace assertion ID. If we stick with authority ID, that we can start moving forward and get this spec to a public review.
So even though I said at the end of my post that, if we agree to do this, I was all on board, but I couldn't help with drafting until after IW. But it's now clear enough to me that if you, and I know Andor said he'd be willing to help, if I can only produce draft text in, for instance, Google Doc, and between you and
Yeah,
Andor, we can
yeah,
then
we can.
turn it.
I can do that. I can do that. I can even allocate Sunday afternoon for that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Well, and I would rather do my work on it between today and tomorrow.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
okay, then I will commit to doing it because yeah, it's a
Okay.
lot simpler, and I think it would be great. I would say we get it the spec there. We give everyone the week, on the TC that won't be at IW, a week to review it. We have a session at IW where we can pull in real park experts, get their any feedback and review, and we're done. I'm
Yep.
We were close enough that it was just these sort of niggling things, and I think the park model for me answers so many questions now about simplifying. We'll still have Turkle, but Turkle is going to be just dramatically simpler for most things. So yeah, I'm enthusiastic, and I am very convinced that once we do that and we get a review of it, we can finalize and get and we can announce that, as I
Yeah.
think we should, at the symposium, November 19th and 20th.
Cool. I'm just capturing the notes here. So we've talked about removing trusters ID. When I say that, I mean as a fundamental parameter construct,
Right.
not the need for a trusters needs an identifier. I'm not at
Well,
all.
what we'll do is we'll have just a little paragraph saying,
Yeah.
hey, identifying trust registries. You can do it, in your. There
Yep.
are various ways to do it, but
Yep.
the thing is, a trust registry is a resource.
Yep.
It's and that's the difference. Whereas the authority ID, that everything stems from that.
Yep.
So this is going to make things quite a
Yeah.
bit easier.
Because I'm willing to get this done, but there is, and I have to say this to the group, there is an amazing amount of frustration that we have not reached closure on something we've been saying for 2 or 3, 4 years.
Understood.
Does entity X have authorization Y under ecosystem Z? That's the frustration, is why is this not reached closure? But part of there is the hard work in a spec that's warranted. I know there are people who are going to look at this and we'll deal with it. That will look and say, "Oh my God, yet another change," because you've gone from a triple to 3 parameters to a 4. People freak out at that. It's like, okay, but we just need to reach closure and then
Yeah.
close it
And we
for
do
now.
have, again, what really turned Andor's in my head was, the maturity and the referenceability of the park model.
Honestly, Drummond, until you said the following in this meeting, which I may have missed text on it, and I apologize, that this cedar model is what Amazon uses at
Oh
their
yeah.
scale. I
Yep.
was like, okay, it could be anything. When
Yeah.
when I first wrote, I'm like, what the hell has Xerox got to do with this? But yeah,
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Not that park.
Yeah. But that's the so we just need to be aware that the outside world needs this badly.
Yep.
Expectations are high, which is one of the reasons why I'm willing to throw this work in, but we can't keep visiting it. If we
Right.
need to visit, great, put PR02 out and start visiting new concepts. Great. That's okay to go to PR03, but get it out. Get the real concrete feedback and deprecate the old one, which I was surprised when I heard people are adamant. Well, that's the spec. I'm like, how did you get to that? Because Drummond, I'm like, maybe we did go to
Wow.
work group published.
We never, we did publish something, but we never went beyond that. We didn't announce it, we didn't, we put
But
it in
again,
the
that's the
I,
intricacies. If
I got
who
it.
knows?
I understand.
Yeah,
No, I'm totally on board with this, and
yeah,
Daryl, I'll work with you offline, but ideally, I'd like to get my Google Doc input done today. I need to sort of front load it because I've
yeah.
got other things I've got to get done.
That'll be helpful for me, Drummond, because you're good at producing the content, and I can knock it out into a PR, and
Perfect.
we can circulate it through. I was going to say Slack, but no, Discord. Hee hee.
Discord, yes. For which, by the way, we did find out we can use images.
I
We
mean,
just,
I'm now authorized to use when you're given a role.
yes.
Yep,
And
yep,
I
which
think
is helpful, and I thanked Rye for that, or yeah, Rye Jones.
good.
Yep.
All right, progress. I'll be back at you, later today. We can use the back channel for that, and now we get to go over to the ecosystem meeting and arrange the symposium. Which, Daryl, your submission is in the queue. It's not on the page yet, but it's in the
Okay.
queue to get on the page.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, awesome.
Perfect.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you all.
Thanks a ton,
Bye-bye.
folks.
You bet.
Bye now.
Thanks, Will. Bye, all.